I had a weekly television program for a year before even introducing the bill. I do not believe that if you want to change the world, you have the right to do it without explaining and educating and communicating to the people. You see how keen I am in making things simple. There is much more complexity behind these general lines, but I believe that any idea can be kept simple, and it's extremely important to do so if you respect the people who, after all, are the beneficiaries of a reform like this. So I did an enormous education system in my country, especially because, remember that the choice was voluntary. So once we approved the reform on November 4, 1980, the same day that Ronald Reagan was elected president of the U.S., incidentally, I remember that I gave 6 months for the pension fund managers to establish themselves, and every day the journalists were coming to me and saying, but Mr. Secretary, and what happens if nobody chooses your idea? I said, well, all my friends and all my family and all my girlfriends have all promised me to choose it, but I didn't have so many of them, you see. So it would have been a huge disaster if 1% of the Chilean workers had chosen personal account. Well, do you know how many of them chose this idea? 95% of them. Trust the people. See, the people, of course, like to have their money in a passbook. In Spanish, we say, where my eyes can see it, where donde mis ojos la vean. My money where my eyes can see it, in a passbook, not in a non-existent trust fund. So educating the citizen is incredibly important. Now, the results, very fast, even though I explained the reform, telling workers that with a 4% real rate of interest, they will be much better than with the pay-as-you-go system that was giving them around 1%, as the American one is giving. Thanks that this reform has had enormous effect on the rate of growth of the economy, and therefore corporate profits, and therefore stock prices, and every worker is invested in the market, the average rate of return for 25 years has been 10.1% above inflation. So you can imagine the power of compound interest working at 10% a year for 25 years. Now, of course, we have had 1 year with -3. And that year I had to go on TV again and explain people that life has ups and downs. But we have also had a year with +25. So I keep telling the people it is not what the market does in a quarterly or in a year, what the market does in 40 years. And the market is a balanced mix of stock and bonds. And if you are very risk averse, you can be all in a bond fund. And in that case, of course, you would have obtained maybe 5%, not 10%. No, nobody has lost a peso to fraud or insider trading. We created I sent some of my people to the Securities and Exchange Commission to study the best, and to the Bank of England. So that has been incredibly, and people own their money. Now this has strengthened the economy. The funds already accumulated are equivalent to 80% of Chilean GNP. That is, in America, it will be around $9 trillion of long-term financing. Some of that money is invested in every company in the country. Even nowadays, we are building, all the highways in Chile are being built by the private sector, financed by 30-year bonds bought by the pension funds and paid by tolls. So in the main highway between Santiago and Valparaiso, there is a big billboard saying, this highway is financed by your retirement savings, and the tolls that you will pay in the next mile will finance your retirement benefits. Now, that is market risk, but would you prefer to have your money financed by the tolls paid by drivers between the two most important cities of a country, or by decision of 535 politicians in the capital of your nation? You see? That is the essence at the end of the day. The market risk of a highway between Santiago and Valparaiso is almost zero. The political risk with demographics and politics and demagoguery can be huge depending on the country. This has brought less unemployment, fiscal responsibility, and ultimately fast growth. Chile has doubled its rate of growth from around 3.5% traditionally to 7% a year. We have already an income per capita at purchasing power parity of $12,000 a year. Portugal has 17,000. So we will become, in another 10 years, a developed country. We'll be the first Latin American country to become a developed country. Not at the level of Switzerland, but at the level of Portugal, Greece, maybe Spain. And then a very important benefit, when you link workers to the benefits of the economy, the political debate, you see, is much more responsible. Nobody can play in Chile class struggle. Nobody can say if we increase the taxes on the corporations or the very rich. People know that they are the corporation. They are invested. Nobody in Chile dares to propose a capital gains tax increase, because the capital gains tax increase in Chile does not only affect Bill Gates, it affects every single person in the country. So we have had, as you may know, a very peaceful and gradual transition to democracy, 15 years of stability. We don't mind very much which government governs Chile as long as the system is stable and the free market reforms are there. Well, this was done 25 years ago. I have dedicated my life in the last 25 years to share this experience around the world. I believe I have a moral duty to do this. This worked in Chile. It could have worked in America. It could have worked in Italy. But it happened that it worked first in Chile. I believe it is my duty to live in planes, regrettably with jet lags, but to enjoy the fact that you can make a difference and you can change the world. I have been in something like maybe 60 countries giving conferences like this, and 25 of them have followed partially or totally, imperfectly or perfectly, a Chilean system. And today we have 100 million workers with personal retirement accounts in countries like Mexico, your neighbor to the south, Poland, Hungary, Kazakhstan, Sweden, Hong Kong, etc., etc., etc. Now, I still feel guilty. After all, there are 200 countries, so I still have a lot to go, another 175 countries. So I know that I have promises to keep and miles to go before I go to sleep, as Robert Frost once famously said. Now, you can see here some statements. You may recognize Mr. McClarty, who went to Chile to look at this before inviting me to the White House, Alan Greenspan, and, of course, the President of the United States. Now, let me finish my last 10 minutes discussing a little the United States of America. I have spent the last 10 years explaining this idea, sharing this idea across the aisle, respectfully, in universities, etc. I always say that I was able to do this in Chile because I was educated in the United States of America. That is, I am basically returning to this great country a fraction of what this great country gave me and my country. During my Harvard years, I studied the Founding Fathers, and I believe that the secret of America is that you began so well your history with a full respect for the rule of law, for private enterprise, for individual responsibility. I have studied the principles, the writings, the Federalist Papers, and I have tried basically to get that to Chile. So when I am around the United States and people say, could this work in the U.S.? Of course. Not only it could work, it would work much, much better than in a long and narrow country. Of course, you're a huge country, and there are some clear advantages. The first of all is that you have an investor class. In Chile, we didn't have a stock exchange. I had also to revise the laws of a stock exchange, of insider trading. We had to begin from zero 25 years ago. You have around 50% of the people today with 401ks, IRAs, or invested directly in the market. So you have the best information system in the world. So that is an enormous advantage. Now, the problem is that there is another 50%. The low-income worker, the African-American, the minimum wage earner that have no chance generally to own a capital. That's why this reform has to be done in the U.S. if we want every single worker in America to have a defined contribution personal retirement account. Second, you have the best, by far, capital markets of the world. I'm always amazed talking to people like you, how you discover new ways to trade off return and risk and diversify portfolio and hedge and futures and so on. I'm fascinated really by what you do. not directly because I don't deal in that, but what you do helps enormously this sort of